Howdy. Have you recently finished your commercial pilot certificate or you're about to? Well, congratulations, you're officially an unemployed pilot. Well, I know many of you are looking for ways to get around working as a flight instructor. So there are low-time pilot jobs out there, and the one I'm going to tell you about in this video is becoming a skydive pilot. Now, skydive pilot is one of those few jobs out there that you can actually get a job with a commercial pilot certificate with only around 250 hours of total time. With that being said, some skydive places, they do want you to have more hours, but there are some out there that will hire you with only 250 hours total time. So the types of skydive companies that will hire you with 250 hours of total time, you freshly earned your commercial pilot certificate, they're going to be the smaller skydive places that use like Cessna 182s as their jump planes. And so to get these kind of jobs, my best advice would actually be just go to that company, because chances are they're going to be a small business. They're not going to have a big website. I mean, they'll probably have a website, but it's not something that they're not going to be that great at creating their website, so they probably won't have like a apply here kind of function. So the best thing you could do is just to actually go there, show up. You don't have to wear a suit like I would normally recommend for most aviation jobs, but just show up and say, hey, I'm a pilot, I'm looking to learn to fly, and if they're looking, they might hire you. When it comes to these small skydive companies, try to keep in mind you're probably not going to make that much money working there. So, I'll tell you about my experience years back. So, I was applying for this skydive pilot job, and the guy that owned the company, he asked me, he's like, hey, has anybody ever paid you to fly before? I was like, oh, no. He's like, all right, well, blah, blah, blah. Come up to the flight school on Saturday and, we'll talk. And so I went up to the flight school, and he told me that they paid $12 per tack hour. Now, if you're a pilot, you know that we log our flight time with the Hobbs meter. But the way that he logged time was with the tachometer. The way that skydiving works is you climb up to a certain altitude, which when you're climbing, you're using full power. So that's when you have a high RPM, the tachometer is going to be spinning more. But after you do your meat bombing, drop the parachutist, well then you're just going to be gliding down to a landing, so you're going to be on idle power. So the engine's going to be running less speed, so less tack time. And so $12 per tack hour, it's really not that much. He said that I was probably going to make around $50 a weekend. And, just some quick Googling online, I saw some skydive places, for commercial pilots with low time, that they have like a $60 minimum nowadays. And so if you keep that in mind, let's say you have a $60 a day minimum, then, let's say you work a normal job 8 hours a day, that's $7.50 an hour if you're working 8 hours at that same $60 minimum. So it's really not that much, and it's really just about getting that flight time. Now you'll still be able to log that time with the Hobbs meter, but for pay, you're just not going to get that much. But hey, the fact that you're getting paid to fly, hey, this is a low time job that you could actually do. But then you also have to keep in mind, okay, how many flights are we actually doing? When do you think that people are going to go skydive? People that never skydived before, they want to do it for fun. When are they going to go skydive? When they're not working. When are they not working? The weekends. How many people do you know is like, hey, it's Wednesday afternoon, let's go fly, or let's go skydive? Not that many. So most of your flying is going to be on the weekend. So if you already have a different job, like during the week, this actually might be a good fit for you. But you're a commercial pilot, and now you're putting all your cards on the table, say, hey, from now on, I'm only flying for money. I'm not doing anything else. Well, you're probably not going to be able to afford your bills. So that's just something to consider. All right, now another thing I want to tell you about skydive operations. Those operators that are going to hire you as a commercial pilot, low time, like I said, they're probably flying Cessna 182s, and if you think back to 91-205, minimum operating equipment, tomato flames, skydive operations are day VFR, And that's exactly what the airplane's going to have, for the aircraft. And so I remember when I was trying to apply for this place, I went up in the airplane just as a passenger, sitting on the floor. They have the seats removed. And so, we went up, dropped our meat bombs, and then we landed, and we're going to go do another flight. And we were doing a pre-flight of the airplane again, and the owner, he went to check the alternator belt, and the alternator belt broke, and he didn't have another one. He said, well, we've got enough juice in the battery to go again. And I was like, what? This is crazy. But then you think about it, 91205 tomato flames. Is alternator one of the required items? No. For night VFR, it is for a source of electrical energy to have an alternator, which means the alternator belt has to be working. But during the day, you are not required to have a source of electrical energy. So it met the requirements of day VFR. We were legal to fly. So was it a safe airplane to fly? Absolutely. But just keep in mind, the airplanes that you're going to be flying, these are not going to be your flight school airplanes that are regularly maintained. These are for making money, and so the less money that they have to spend on maintenance, the more profit they have. So they're only going to do the absolute minimum, probably. So that's that. Now, if you're going to try and get a job at like one of those places that fly King Airs, Caravans for their skydiving, they're not going to hire you with 250 hours. So they probably want at least 500, 800, 1,200 hours. In those cases, yeah, it's going to be a while before you can get that kind of job. All right. Now I want to tell you about kind of just the people you're going to meet in this industry. So when I was applying for this job, the guy the owner that I was talking to, he told me, he's like, all right, come on, show up on Saturday, and we'll get you up in the airplane, and go do a couple flights. And we did that. I didn't get to fly, but I just got to hang out with them. It was more of a fit to see if I liked them, if they liked me, because the skydive people, they're extreme, so they want someone that they can, they're like, oh, this guy's cool, we could hang out with them. Well, but yeah, so we got along pretty well. But then he said, all right, call me on Thursday, because I'm buying an airplane, I want to go pick it up, and I want you to fly the other one. So I'm like, okay, cool. I was like, yes, I'm going to get paid to fly. Well, then I called Thursday, and he didn't answer the phone. I'm like, crap. So a couple hours went by, I called him again. And then a couple hours went by, I called him again. I'm like, why isn't he answering? I was like, you know what? I'm going to get this job. And so I actually drove there, and there's nobody there. I'm just like, man, this is ridiculous. So I just kind of realized, man, I guess I'm not getting this job. Well, a couple years goes by, and then I'm like, and I kind of forgot about all that bad feeling I got in my mouth, about the bad taste in my mouth about this company. But I was like, you know what? I want to go fly again. I'd already been working as a flight instructor, I think, and so I was like, you know what? Maybe I could just pick up a few extra, flights here and there. And so I called him up, like, hey, I tried working before with you, and I'd like to try again. And he said, well, all right, well, go ahead and come up or call me on Tuesday, and we'll talk about some more. Same thing. Has anybody ever paid you to fly? I'm like, well, yeah, actually they have. So anyways, the next Tuesday comes along. I give him a call, doesn't answer. Try to give him a call the next day, doesn't answer. I'm like, this is why I didn't want to work for him. All right, well, so there's that one company. You might be thinking, oh, well, yeah, that was a bad company. I want to go work for a different one. Well, maybe around the same time, I saw a job opening for another skydive place. And by this time, I already had 800 hours. And I saw that this company was hiring, and you had to have 800 hours. You're flying a Caravan. And I was like, ooh, I actually qualify for this job. And they're paying like $45,000 a year, which, back then was pretty good money for a commercial pilot that didn't meet the 1,500 hour rule. So I put in my application, texted the number that they told me to text, and he was like, oh, well, hey, can you start training on Wednesday? well, I had a job, and so I was going to have to put in a 2 weeks notice. I'm like, well, actually, I'm working that day, and I got to put in a 2 weeks notice, but can I come on a different day, like on a day off? And silence. I was like, what's going on? I'm like, hey, I'm very interested in the job. I'll be happy to, work with, be flexible, and just silence. So I was like, oh, I guess it's just kind of the industry. So it's rough if you're, trying to find a low-time pilot job, and it can be tough, the industry. And so if you're really just trying to get that flight time, so you can get hired by the airlines or corporate aviation, charter, whoever, I really recommend you just bite the bullet and get a job as, get your flight instructor certificates and get a job as a CFI, because that's the best way you're going to build flight time, and you make pretty good money. So, all right, well, I'll see you in the next video. If you would, like, subscribe, and comment in the comment section. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them in another video. So, all right, y'all take care. Bye.